April the 28th, fungi. April is not really a month for large fungi, except for one or two notable exceptions, the most obvious being St. George's mushroom, Chalce gambosa. It is so called due to it appearing around St. George's Day, April the 23rd. Generally it goes on into May and is seen more often in the spring if the spring is warmer than usual. Although fond of chalky grassland slopes, it can also be found in woodlands, hedgerows and even cemeteries. It tends to be noticed more as other large fungi are not common in the spring. Being a big, solid-looking biscuit or ivory-coloured mushroom, it doesn't look unlike a large, heavy specimen of a cultivated mushroom. It usually smells of ground flower, but sometimes of cucumber, and although famous for its edibility, has a strong mealy flavour that is not to everyone's taste. Sometimes it is found in large rings. 10 pounds of it was collected from such a ring at Keston, and another old record from Putney Heath suggests in the region of 50 pounds. Unfortunately, as ever, there is a poisonous species with which it can be confused, although this one fortunately tends to appear in the autumn rather than the spring. This is the red-staining Inocybe patuiliade. It differs in that it usually has a split cap and turns a strong red when bruised. Rather than meal, this species smells of rotten fruit. It is young specimens and overzealous pickers that present the main problem, and an unfortunate mistake between these two could result in asphyxiation, heart attack and death. The most famous edible spring mushroom is the morel, Morchella esculenta. Like St. George's mushroom, it is found on dry, chalky slopes, under elm and ash, and tends to appear, like many other mushrooms, after rain. It also turns up in gardens and even window boxes. Once again, there is another similar poisonous species to be avoided. This is the false morel, Gyromitra esculenta, which unfortunately also fruits in the spring. The false morel elicits no symptoms for the first 10 hours, after which you fall into a coma and die. Other fungi seen this month are mainly old, decaying bracket fungi, although some, such as dryad saddle Polyporus squamosus, are starting to produce their new fruiting bodies. Occasionally, bright scarlet cups of Sarcosphaera coronaria may be found. More unusual fungi include another morel, Verpa conica, which can be found on Dartford Heath, and Sepultaria sumneriana, which looks like a discarded husk of a sweet chestnut, but is occasionally found on these cedar trees. Other species regularly recorded include Panaeolus funicola and Entoloma sericium on lawns, Panaeolus acuminatus, Disciotis venosa, and Boletus vitellinus in grassy areas, Tuberia conspersa on woody debris, Coprinus bicaceus on dead wood, and Coprinus congregatus on compost. In wet Aprils, the jelly fungi also do well, with Jusia auricularia auricular seen on elder, and the brain fungus Tremella mesenterica, often seen on ash. Perhaps most striking of all are the chalice-shaped fungi, Sclerotina tuberosa, which are found around small groups of ill-looking wood anemones on whose tubers they grow. Mosses. April is a good time to look for more unusual mosses and liverworts, especially after April showers, and before they all dry up in the summer heat. There are well over 100 different species in the Box Hill area, with a number of less common types of moss associated with calcareous grassland. A good place to start is the slightly damper microclimate at the base of the famous south-facing cliff on the path beside the River Mole. Here you might find interesting feather mosses, such as the golden feather moss, Campylliadelphus chrysophilus, the yellow feather moss, Camptothecium lutescens, the foxtail feather moss, Thamnium alopecurum, and the very fine-leaved tender feather moss, Rhynchostegiella tenella. Others to look out for include the beech feather moss, Cirriphyllum crassinervium on the roots of trees, a pouxwort, Physidens minutulus, easily missed on small pieces of chalk, and the English rock bristle, Saligaria calcina, which shows a preference for small stones. Ascending the hill on the chalky slopes over towards the zigzag path, there are beardless mosses, Weissia species, recorded as well as Potia recta, a notchwort, Lycolia turbinata, a cylinder moss, Entodon artocarpus, and the very attractive prickly tamarisk moss, Abitinella abitina variety hystricosa, which even seems to thrive when not even attached to the ground. Other bryophytes to look out for ascending the hill over towards juniper top are the more attractive mosses such as Filbert's tamarisk moth, Thuidium assimile, and the glittering wood moth, Hyliconium splendens. The comb moss, Tinidium molluscum, which can look like combed animal fur, as well as Necra crispa, and a scalewort, Fulania tamarisci, which can also be found. The top of the Box Hill Plateau is dissected by a number of different relatively remote valleys, for example Happy Valley and Ashurst Valley. These provide a number of even more unusual habitats, which certain mosses and liverworts seem to show a preference for. For example, bare rock and scrub on stony ground, the surface of flints, and even the surface of yew logs. New types of moss to look out for here are an aloe moss, Aloenia dioides, a tail moss, Anomodon virtuosus, a flatwort, Odontoschisma denudatum, a scalewort, Perella platyphila, as well as an extinguisher moss, Encalypta vulgaris. The latter produces fruiting bodies that look less like extinguishers and more like dunces caps.